America's big, powerful, and whining all the time, complaining all the time, feeling aggrieved all the time. Partly it comes from arrogance, strangely enough. The American mindset is we should have everything. When there is some limit, well, that's a grievance. And Trump is a master at grievances. So for him, everything is a complaint. Look what China does. Look what these migrants do. This is the politics of grievance, and it works. Americans are annoyed by the low quality of government. I don't think Trump has too many answers for them on many, many fronts. Maybe he'll do some good in certain areas, though. I must say, every president, at least since Bill Clinton, which was the 1990s, then George Bush Jr., then Obama, then Trump, then Biden, I've kept saying, oh my God, so much incompetence. And the American people feel that. And so Trump is saying, I will restore America, but we'll see. Some of the things he says make sense. Some make absolutely no sense at all. And so we're in for a ride.
Würden Sie sagen, dass die Präsidenten vorher, Sie haben angefangen mit George W. Bush oder mit George Bush, mit dem Vater, die waren inkompetent. Was ist mit den Präsidenten vorher? Carter, Nixon, waren das kompetentere?
I say since Bill Clinton came to office, it's been at best mediocrity, but in general incompetence. So I would put all of the presidents, Clinton, Bush Jr., Obama, Trump 1, Biden, as below the standard of adequate, and some cases terrible. Bush Jr. invading Iraq, Obama invading or trying to overthrow the Syrian government, attacking Libya, participating in a coup in Ukraine. Terrible. Biden, I was shocked because I voted for him in 2020, and he was just miserable. Maybe, by the way, so old that he wasn't really there. And they may have just been hiding his incapacity. We don't really know. But he was terrible. This war in Ukraine could easily have been avoided with normal diplomacy between the US and Russia. But Biden wouldn't engage in it. And even when there was a chance of the war stopping in March 2022, in the negotiations that Turkey was mediating, Biden stepped in to stop that too, so that the war continued. So I'm pretty disappointed in our political system. Of course, there are many reasons for it, but one is that money took over American politics decades ago, and that means that we have special interests buying the politicians basically, and you don't get good results out of that.
Wir waren jetzt schon bei Russland. Ich würde gerne noch innenpolitisch bleiben, Jeffrey. Man hört jetzt ganz viel vom neuen Gilded Age, das ausgerufen werden soll. Trump zitiert immer William McKinley und seine Zollpolitik. Das klassische Gilded Age, das hatte Figuren wie Carnegie und Stanford, Menschen, die aus Stahl was geschaffen haben, Eisenbahn, Elektrifizierung. Die haben einen schlechten Ruf heute, Räuberbarone nennt man sie, aber gleichzeitig haben sie Amerika groß gemacht. Das neue Gilded Age unter Trump, der hat Leute wie Zuckerberg und Musk. Machen die nicht in Bullshit-Industrie?
Actually, Musk builds a lot of interesting things. Musk builds Teslas. Musk builds starships. Musk builds humanoid robots. He's actually a very, very interesting entrepreneur. So I would put him in the class of great entrepreneurs, actually. Does that make him appropriate as a prime minister, which in fact he kind of is right now? No, I don't think so. The fact that at the inaugural you had actually so many billionaires around, and they had funded this takeover of power. And we know that the top richest 10 Americans now have more than $2 trillion of wealth, and they're very politically active right now. Yes, this is the Gilded Age on steroids, I would say. This is much more even than it was in the age of the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers and the Carnegies. Now, what will come out of this, what is happening in the economy over the last 30 years is more and more inequality, more and more concentration of wealth. And in the American system, that wealth is turning into a concentration of political power. I don't think that's going to slow down in the next few years. I don't hear any word about the common people in any of the discourse. And when you think about McKinley, well, that was the age not only of the Gilded Age wealth, but that was also the age of imperialism, which of rank, gross imperialism, which Trump obviously admires. In 1898, during the McKinley administration, they just decided it was time to pick up some new American colonies. So they concocted a phony war. It was a real war, but on phony pretenses with Spain. And there's the Philippines, there's Cuba, there's Costa Rica, Puerto Rico. So they started building their empire. Trump loves this idea. Greenland, Canada, Panama. Well, this is his milieu right now, his métier. So this is very strange.
Sie sprachen ja von Elon Musk und dass er wirklich viel macht, Teslas und auch in KI und so weiter. Er forscht ja wie andere im Silicon Valley auch am ewigen Leben. Ist das eine Branche, von der Sie sagen würden, das ist richtiges Business oder ist das Träumerei?
You know, maybe Elon Musk's big passion is getting to Mars. And he even says, you know, we can't be bound to the Earth because the Earth could be wrecked. So we have to be able to be interplanetary or maybe even interstellar. I wish we would just take care of Earth a little bit better. I wouldn't mind that my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren and others to come would be, I don't have great-grandchildren yet, but I have grandchildren, and I think of them and I want them to be able to live on Earth. And I want them to be able to live peacefully on Earth. And I don't want to blow up this planet, and I don't want to destroy the planet. And I'm not sure what these people think. They're heading for Mars, but, you know, the rest of us are back here on Earth. And I would really like us to pay attention to that. And so far, we don't have much evidence that Trump is paying much attention to certain parts of that. For example, the environmental crisis, which is absolutely real. Trump won't pay any attention to for the next 4 years. His first act was to pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement, which is completely dreadful, completely ignorant, completely harmful, but first act.
Jeffrey, es gibt noch einen Begriff, der immer wieder fällt, das ist Splendid Isolation, das auch im Zuge von Donald Trump, dass man sich in Isolation begibt. Es gibt europäische Intellektuelle, die sagen, wenn die Amerikaner in Isolation gingen, in eine globale Isolation, dann wäre das eine Chance für die Welt, Frieden herzustellen. Würden Sie das auch so sehen wie die Intellektuellen?
There's a big misunderstanding about the United States and isolation. There is no isolationism in the United States. Donald Trump is not an isolationist. And interestingly, 100 years ago, at the end of World War I, when Woodrow Wilson proposed the League of Nations, and then the US Senate rejected America's entry into the League of Nations, it was said, oh, America's isolationist. No. America rejected entry into the League of Nations in 1921 because America was imperialist, not isolationist. The lead opponent of America entering the League of Nations was a senator, Henry Cabot Lodge, who was a great fan of McKinley, a great fan of Theodore Roosevelt, and a great imperialist. And his big complaint was, we don't want to be in the League of Nations because then we're going to be stuck. We're going to have to do what they say. This is Trump. Trump doesn't have an ounce of isolation in him. What Trump is an imperialist. We don't know exactly which kind, we don't know how seriously, and so on. But Trump's whole idea, and he repeats it endlessly, is we are free and sovereign. What does that mean? It means we don't have to obey anybody. We don't have to sign any treaties. We don't have to live under the UN Charter. We're free. We're sovereign. Basically, it's a kind of global anarchy that he likes because he says the United States is so powerful, we'll do what we want. And that is not isolationism. So when he calls for, we're going to take Greenland because we want it, no joke. Canada's our 51st state, no joke. Do not think this is a joke. Then all the European politicians say, oh, yes, this is the transatlantic alliance, and we're all together in liberal values. Could some politicians here open their eyes and understand something about the current reality and get their act together to have a European policy? This would be very interesting from my point of view. Europe needs a foreign policy that isn't just, yes, Mr. President, or, oh, you want Greenland? Let's talk about it. We'll build bases. You can have resources, but don't take it away from us. Could somebody here have a real foreign policy?
Würden Sie sagen, dass Europa, ich würde das drastische Wort verwenden, ist Europa der Vasall der Amerikaner?
It became so after 2008. You can almost date it because you think about Willy Brandt. Was he a vassal of the United States? No way. Ostpolitik was not an American invention, believe me. This was not something the Americans liked or tolerated. Helmut Schmidt was not a vassal of the United States. Helmut Kohl was not a vassal of the United States. Helmut Kohl said, we're going to unify. And that was it. And he guided George Bush. We're going to do this. He guided Mikhail Gorbachev. I happened to have the chance to meet Chancellor Kohl during that process because I was an advisor to Poland. Germany was running a foreign policy then. There was no question about it. What happened? Well, you can almost date it to the NATO summit in Bucharest in 2008. Because the United States wanted to do something really reckless, and that was commit to enlarging NATO to Ukraine and to Georgia. And that was not only an utterly unnecessary, provocative thing to do, because it's right in Russia's face, but it was also completely contrary to every word that Hans-Dietrich Genscher and James Baker promised to Gorbachev for the German reunification. So Angela Merkel knew this, and she knew that it was dangerous. And while Schroeder had opposed the US-Iraq war, for example, and was quite outspoken about it, in 2008, there's Angela Merkel, and she's in Bucharest, and George W. Bush Jr. is proposing some idiotic idea that there should be a membership action plan for Ukraine and Georgia. And she says, no, this is a terrible idea. And she and Sarkozy say, no, we have to stop this. And Bush says, no, we are going to have Ukraine inside NATO. And in the end, she gives in. And she says, okay, and it's declared, Ukraine and Georgia will be part of NATO. That was the end of an independent German foreign policy, as far as I'm concerned. Very sad. Because she was completely right. She was resisting for the right reason, but she could not hold the opposition, or chose not to, gave in, and that put us on the path to war. In 2014, the U.S. participated in the violent overthrow of the Ukrainian government. Again, the Europeans had negotiated with Yanukovych on February 21st, 2014, you stay in power, get a unity government and early elections several months down the road. The United States. New government, pro-NATO. What did Europe do? Nothing. It just went with the United States. We had an assistant secretary of state at the time named Victoria Nuland. She had a phone call. Fuck the Europeans. Excuse my language. It was her language. What did Europe do? Absolutely whatever the United States said. Then in 2015 came the Minsk II agreement. And the Minsk II agreement was to be guaranteed by Germany and France in the Normandy process. And on February 17th, 2015, the UN Security Council voted unanimously to back the Minsk II agreement, with Germany as guarantor. What did Germany do? Nothing, because the United States said, ignore it. This is not something we're interested in. Did Germany stand up and say, no, but we have a UN Security Council vote, we're responsible? No, it didn't. Even Chancellor Merkel said a couple of years ago in a shocking interview, oh, it was just to buy time. I don't even believe she believed that in 2015, but she didn't stand up for the treaty. So from 2008 onward, I don't see an independent policy in Europe. I just see the Europeans following what the United States does. I can tell you the US is incompetent, and it's put Europe in a terrible situation. And still today, if you ask President van der Leyen what her objective is, oh, good transatlantic relations. Till this moment, even with the United States saying we're going to take back Greenland, or take Greenland, for heaven's sake. By the way, the Vikings got there 1,000 years ago. The Danes have been there for a very long time, even before the Inuits, if I understand the history correctly. Maybe I don't. But in any event, here you have the United States saying we're going to put on tariffs, we're going to take Greenland. And Europe is full of how we love America and how this is a transatlantic relationship. And if the U.S. stops the war in Ukraine, we'll continue the war, and all this nonsense, rather than a sound foreign policy for Europe, which is based on security and prosperity for Europe.
Was mich ein bisschen verwundert, die Republikaner in Amerika galten viele Jahre lang eigentlich als Falken, als diejenigen, die Krieg wollen. Jetzt sind die Republikaner diejenigen, die Frieden in Aussicht stellen, und die Demokraten haben in den letzten 4 Jahren Krieg forciert. Wo kommt diese Umkehrung her, dass die Demokraten plötzlich Falken sind?
Well, I scratch my head over this too, because I was a lifelong Democrat until I left the party out of disgust, because it became the war party. I wouldn't say the Republicans are exactly the peace party, but maybe Trump will end some of these wars, maybe. We have to be very vigilant because there's no guarantee of that. But the Democrats, my God, absolutely lost the voice for peace. And it happened step by step. There was a very militant part of the Democratic Party. Hillary Clinton was of that ilk, for example. She's a neocon hardliner. She's now my colleague at Columbia University also. But she was always for these wars and pretty terrible foreign policy as far as I'm concerned. But even then, there were Democrats that were opposed to that. And so I was in the wing that was the anti-war wing. And in the Iraq War in 2003, there were Democrats on the other side that said we shouldn't do this. But Obama followed Bush Jr. It became a continuity. Bush Jr. and Obama, very little change of foreign policy. The only change was that as Obama came into office, he got the Nobel Peace Prize for nothing. And then he tried to overthrow the Syrian government and overthrew the government of Libya and overthrew the government, was part of the conspiracy to overthrow, or the coup to overthrow the government of Ukraine. From then on, I had fewer and fewer people that I could talk to in the Democratic Party, because I know a lot of congressmen and senators, and they were not interested in hearing my complaints about peace. By the time of the Biden administration, there was no one, as one congressman that I kind of talked to about this, but basically no one in the Democratic Party was ready to express any opposition to the Biden foreign policy. The Biden foreign policy was a continuity of neoconservatism. It was expand NATO, antagonize China, divide the world between democracies and autocracies. And if you come into office dividing the world, we're good, you're evil, you're basically gearing up for conflict. And that's what the Biden administration did. So maybe one thing that happened was that since Biden went that way and the Democrats were trying to keep power, they just followed Biden as the leader, and no one would speak out on the other side. So maybe it was just tactical. But I can tell you, for the last 4 years, I couldn't find a congressman who would really speak out and say we shouldn't be in this Iraq war, or in the Ukraine war. To his credit, Bernie Sanders, who I advised in his 2016 election, did speak out against the U.S. backing of Israel. So that was a plus. But generally, the Democrats lost it.